Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a fascinating, entirely neutral look at an essay by Gaston Ray titled An Apology of Scalable Production as a Civilizational Foundation. In it, Ray unpacks the economic philosophy of Jeff Bezos, specifically looking at the defense of scalable production over wealth redistribution. Now, whether you totally agree or completely disagree with these concepts, the economic theories behind them are absolutely thought-provoking. We're going to break down the author's argument step by step to see exactly how this perspective functions.
Okay, let's dive into this with a quote that literally reignited massive debates around wealth, taxation, and inequality. Back in a May 2026 CNBC interview, Jeff Bezos said, "You could double the taxes I pay, and it's not going to help that teacher in Queens." I mean, it's a bold, highly controversial statement, right? It immediately sparked an absolute firestorm of criticism. But Gaston Ray's essay asks us to hit pause for a second and really look at the underlying economic machinery that makes someone say something like that.
So this brings us to the central question of the whole essay. Does scalable production actually do more for civilization than charity? To answer this, Ray uses what's known as a steelman approach. This basically means he deliberately concedes the absolute strongest points made by the critics, like acknowledging that cronyism and workplace abuse are very, very real, before offering a deep structural counterargument about how civilizational wealth is actually generated.
To get to the core of all this dense economic theory, our roadmap today covers 6 parts. 1. The wealth creation debate. 2. Growing the economic pie. 3. Tax and charity redefined. 4. The exploitation myth demystified. 5. Monopoly and the state. And finally, 6. Testing skin in the game.
Part 1. The Wealth Creation Debate.
Right out of the gate, the author freely admits that, yeah, workplace abuse, predatory corporate behavior, and cronyism, they're absolutely real. Humans misuse power all the time. But the essay's core argument draws a very sharp line in the sand here. It argues these phenomena are failures of state intervention and a lack of real competition, not the actual engine of wealth creation itself. According to Ray, critics are correctly identifying the pathologies of the modern economy, but they're systematically misidentifying the root causes.
Part 2. Growing the economic pie.
Now, what's really interesting here is the zero-sum fallacy. This is that hardwired human intuition that if one person gets a bigger slice of the pie, your slice must inevitably get smaller. And in a tribal environment with fixed land and resources, that was actually true. It's an ancestral instinct we still carry into modern politics today. That's exactly why the idea that billionaire wealth isn't just extracted from the middle class feels so deeply counterintuitive to so many of us.
But the essay contrasts this static, kind of feudal mindset with the dynamic reality of modern history. If you look at the Madison Project data on long-run output, real GDP per capita was basically flat for millennia. Then boom, it turned vertical, literally like a hockey stick right at the Industrial Revolution. Bezos' philosophy relies heavily on this single most replicated fact in economic history. The pie demonstrably grows. Wealth is created through ecosystems, new jobs, and lowered transaction costs. It's not just captured from some fixed, static pool.
Part 3. Tax and charity redefined.
Consider the actual numbers for a second. In the U.S., the top 1% of earners supply roughly 40% of all federal income tax revenue, while the bottom 50% supply only about 3%. Bezos' proposal here is radically simple. Just entirely eliminate that 3% share for the bottom half. As the essay points out, a nurse making $75,000 a year shouldn't be wiring large chunks of their paycheck to Washington just to have it filtered through a massive bureaucracy. It's way more efficient to simply let working-class earners keep their money directly in their pockets.
And when we talk about how to actually help that bottom 50%, the essay contrasts charity with scalable production. Look, immediate charity addresses transactional scarcity, and it's absolutely vital, right? It feeds someone for a day. But building massive, ultra-efficient matrices like Amazon's logistics network structurally and permanently lowers the cost of distributing goods for millions of people across entire generations. Raindeway argues that both are undeniably good, but only scalable production compounds over time.
However, and this is an important caveat, the essay impartially points out a major warning from classical liberal economists, known as the public choice warning. Thinkers like Buchanan and Tulloch warn that if a huge majority of the population becomes permanently tax-exempt, they effectively lose their fiscal reason to restrain government spending. They might just continuously vote to expand the state because, well, they aren't the ones paying for it. So, Ray frames Bezos' tax proposal as a great first step, but warns it's dangerously incomplete without strict fiscal discipline.
Part 4. The exploitation myth demystified.
To really get this, we have to step back into the 19th century.
The essay explains that the old Marxist idea that profit is inherently theft was actually debunked by marginalist economists like Karl Menger in the 1870s through something called the subjective theory of value. This theory completely flipped the causal arrow of how prices are formed. Value doesn't come from the raw labor pumped into a product. It actually originates from how much the consumer subjectively values the final good, and that value flows backward onto the labor.
So the crucial point is that modern academics don't really use Marx to argue exploitation anymore. They use the concept of monopsony. As the essay defines it, this happens when an employer has so much immense market power that they can suppress wages simply because the worker literally cannot walk away. Ray uses this great metaphor of the blocked exit. If an exit is open, a competitor is just going to swoop in and offer that underpaid worker more money. Systematic wage suppression really only persists when that exit is actively blocked.
To break this down even further, the author separates what people loosely call exploitation into three distinct concepts: moral cruelty and juridical coercion. Things like outright fraud or illegal practices are genuine failures and violations, no question. But ordinary cost minimization, where a business pays the lowest competitive wage possible, that isn't exploitation. It's simply the symmetrical mirror of a worker trying to secure the highest possible wage. Calling cost minimization exploitation completely misnames the basic structure of voluntary trade.
Part 5. Monopoly and the State.
Here, the author directly tackles the modern critique that massive digital ecosystems operate like these inescapable chicken farms, squeezing their participants. To address this, Ray brings in Joseph Schumpeter's famous concept of creative destruction and contrasts it with durable monopolies. In a truly open market, dominance is always temporary. Think about it. Titans like MySpace, Nokia, Kodak, they all rapidly fell to better competitors. The essay argues that durable, inescapable monopolies literally do not exist naturally. They only survive when they're shielded by the state through legal moats, massive subsidies, or compliance barriers that block any new competitors from entering the arena.
And this perfectly highlights the essay's critical distinction between an authentic entrepreneur and a privilege-hunting rent seeker. The authentic entrepreneur wins by satisfying consumers better than anyone else. The rent seeker, on the other hand, wins by using the law to exclude rivals. They rely on occupational licensing, restrictive zoning, and intense lobbying. The trap, Rappy argues, isn't the free market itself. The trap is the state, and the lock is simply sold to the highest bidder.
Finally, Part 6. Testing skin in the game. Now, the essay fully concedes that titans like Bezos and Elon Musk take billions in government money, but it applies a very specific test to judge whether they are just rent seekers or genuine market innovators. Back in 2014, SpaceX essentially broke the space cartel. Elon Musk's company slashed costs with reusable rockets, but they found themselves locked out of defense contracts by a stagnant, state-sanctioned monopoly held by legacy aerospace companies. Musk didn't go to Washington to lobby for a special handout. Instead, he risked his entire standing by suing the U.S. Air Force for the bare legal right to compete on merit. He put his skin in the game.
We saw something very similar in 2019. When the Pentagon awarded a massive $10 billion cloud contract to Microsoft, Amazon didn't just quietly accept it. Alleging improper political pressure, Amazon sued the federal government. The essay notes that, sure, their motive was obviously self-interested, but the instrument they use is what actually matters here. It was a legal challenge to arbitrary state power. They risked their own standing to demand open competition rather than just begging for some exclusionary privilege.
So, to summarize the essay's core conclusion, we have the engine and we have the friction. Scalable production, driven by authentic competition and innovation, is the engine that generates civilizational wealth and permanently lowers the cost of living for everyone. Blocked exits, cronyism, and state-backed monopolies, that's the friction. Reggie concludes that while wealth redistribution can certainly mitigate the hardship caused by that friction, it is the production, the engine itself, that actually drives human progress forward.
I want to leave you with this final, genuinely provocative question from our exploration today. If production is truly the engine of wealth, how do we fix the friction without stopping the machine? How can society address the very real issues of inequality and blocked exits while still maintaining this incredible engine of scalable innovation? It is a profoundly difficult challenge to think about. Thanks so much for joining us for this explainer, and remember to keep questioning the mechanics of the world around you.